I'm here with John Sebesta, who's a professor at DU and was one of my classmates in the executive PhD at the University of Denver. Um, Thanks for doing this, John. And I guess just to kick it off, why did you do the PhD to begin with?
Yeah, it's a fun question as with all of us who are later in our careers. So at that point in my career, I'd done corporate, I'd done entrepreneurial stuff, and my passion was around how can we use business as a tool more effectively to broadly benefit society, instead of just extracting resources, extracting wealth. And and so I knew that I wanted to learn more about that, and that meant research, but also that I wanted to teach the next generation of students a different model for business than I was taught. And so getting the PhD was kind of a requirement to do that. And so I figured that that was the best way to have the impact that I wanted to have was through research and teaching. And so the PhD seemed like a natural path.
Well, that's really great. And then, what did you think would happen after you took it? Had you already had the job at DU?
I got the job at DU 2 years into the program. And so I started teaching as an adjunct right when the program started, just begin kind of making that transition and validate if I liked teaching. Because at that point it was a concept, but I'd never taught in an academic setting in a university setting. And so I wasn't sure how that was going to go. So yeah, I started as an adjunct, found that I really enjoyed it, bless you. And then moved when the opportunity arose during the program to move into a full-time role. I jumped on it.
That's great. Um, Tell us about your dissertation. What did you study and what was the outcome?
Yeah, the dissertation journey was interesting for me in the sense of when I started the program, I had some ideas of what I wanted to research, and that evolved quite a bit throughout the program. Um, And so I moved more and more into entrepreneurial cognition and how people think and how that influences the decisions that they make and then the outcomes from those decisions. Um, and Entrepreneurial mindset is a concept that kept coming up. We talk about it as part of, we develop in our students an entrepreneurial mindset. Um, and I started asking, like, what is it? Do we even know what that construct is? And do we have a sense of if we're developing or not, and why it matters? So those were kind of the questions that initiated the search, or the path down the research question. And so then looking more into it, I found some people describing it in different ways. One of the core ways was around the concept of metacognition, of thinking about how we think. And so traditionally we think of there's an analytical thought process and there's an intuitive thought process. And we generally say analytical is better. Most entrepreneurs are intuitive. And so wanted to understand how that was influencing things. And so looked at the entrepreneurial journey and different steps in that journey and said, well, there's logic that says this step really needs more of an analytical process and this step needs more of an intuitive process. And so is it that one is better than the other, or is it really this metacognition and the ability to switch? And so I studied the interaction between metacognition and cognitive style, as well as entrepreneurial alertness to try and see which of those things really impacted performance at different steps in the entrepreneurial journey. And what it ended up is that metacognition was actually more important than anything else. Because if you had metacognition, you could switch and you could use the intuitive style needed to recognize opportunities and then qualify those opportunities using more of an analytical approach. And so anyways, that's the long-winded answer.
No, it's a great answer. So tell me, is metacognition something someone can develop or do you just have it?
That's a great question. So generally you can develop it. And so the logic is that you develop it by getting put into situations that kind of drive you to practice it and then reflect on that. And so I actually, outside of the dissertation, did a pre and post survey with my students. So I did it on student samples. And so I surveyed them at the beginning of the quarter, and then they got into teams and I assessed it at a team level. But then I also assessed the students at the end of the quarter. And just from that 10-week class, there was a growth in metacognitive thinking. And so it's certainly something that we believe you can teach. One of the analogies that's common to describe it is I enjoy golfing. And so like if you're out golfing and you're hit it off to the right, and there's kind of a tree in front of you, you can choose to pull out the wedge and hit it over the tree. You can choose to choke down on the 7-iron and try to punch it under the tree. And it's that like that decision making is the concept of metacognition of like what stroke, what approach is right for this situation. And when you keep, if you're like me and you keep hitting it right and getting behind trees, you develop that skill, because you are in that situation a lot and you've seen what works and when it works, and to question your initial reaction or initial approach.
And presumably that comes with a whole bunch of debriefing to
Yeah,
make that connection for them and self-reflection and some of those
exactly.
skills.
Yeah.
That's great. So have you published your dissertation?
No, I have not. I got distracted. So as before I finished my dissertation, I got put or asked if I would dive into a qualitative research project studying the entrepreneurial ecosystem here, which led me down a deep hole of over 50 interviews and 6 focus groups and 4 panels, and I think I've got like 120 hours of recorded conversations that I've been processing and writing up and summarizing. And so trying to get that paper published has actually become the higher priority for one reason or another. And so my focus shifted, like honestly, before I finished the dissertation to starting into this project. And yeah, it's been a couple of years, but a really good one and fun one as well.
So that's pretty exciting. It sounds like even though maybe publishing wasn't the top reason you started, there's opportunities just keep bubbling up to maybe do some writing and do some more studies.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Now I've continued down. So that research project is well underway. We've actually published a paper at a conference, or proceeding a referee proceeding at a conference and presented that. Have another paper that we're just getting into some journals. Actually, it's already gotten rejected at an FT50. So it's went straight for the top, one of the top 2 entrepreneurship journals. Didn't get there, and so now we're kind of reformatting the story. They had some good comments in terms of why. So now we're rewriting that and trying to position it for another top entrepreneurship journal. But then, yeah, a handful of other projects kind of in the pipeline as well.
Well, that's great. Wow, it's you're not even 10-year line, and yet all this is bubbled up. And so tell me about your collaborations with others. Like, do you think the PhD has put you in that space where you're able to, get involved in projects?
So I would say yes and no. Internally, yes. It has, the program did a good job of exposing us to a bunch of different faculty within the university. And so I've been able to build some of those relationships and dive into a couple of projects. Then because I'm still here and I'm on the faculty here, I've been able to also advise some of the later cohorts. And so I've advised a couple of ARP projects. I'm on a couple of dissertation committees. And so I'm continuing to support research that way and collaborate in that regard. I would say where, especially an executive PhD program like ours struggled was it didn't get us exposure out into other universities and other academics. And so I've been trying to build those networks, but that's a slow process. And so like I've gone to AOM a couple of times, but I walked in and didn't know a single person. And so trying to make connections at a 10,000 person conference is where most people know each other is a challenge. So that process has been slower of building connections outside of the university.
Yeah, interesting. Now, what about the skills that you learned, or did you learn skills in the program? And if so, how have you been able to apply them?
So PhD is a research degree, and so it is definitely, I would say, prepared me to do research. I obviously am not didn't get the first FT50 to hit. We'll see if we can get one of them too. We'll keep pushing, but but also the feedback that came was that the writing was really solid and the structure of the paper was really solid. That there was one aspect where we were talking about entrepreneurial journeys, and he questioned if we could do that without a more longitudinal approach. That 2 years wasn't sufficient. And so it's like, okay, it's a methodological question, and that's a reasonable pushback, and we could debate that. But at the same point, there hasn't been any pushback of the research isn't rigorous, you're not writing well, you're not, so I think that it prepares us to do high quality research. So in that part, it has definitely prepared us, and I feel like I'm able to do that. I've served now again on a couple of dissertation committees and feel like I can ask as relevant of questions as most other people on them. Obviously, I'm more junior and don't have as much experience, but still, I haven't felt like I was unprepared in those regards.
That's wonderful. And do you think it's helped your ability to teach?
Oh, absolutely. Especially the doing the research and being able to bring those examples in, and just reading more of the literature where, I teach largely undergrads, and so I'm not going to belabor them with what is effectuation theory and why do we have effectual processes versus causal processes and when should you use those as an entrepreneur. But at the same point, like I had a student the other day making a recommendation in how to approach something, and it was able to say like, well, the way you're thinking about that is a causal process, and there's also this other process called effectuation, and here's how you would approach it from that lens, and what are the pros and cons of doing that. And so I can have enough of a theoretical foundation that then I can have those conversations without bludgeoning students with theory that they don't care about, and keep trying to keep it relevant for them.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And coming from the business world, even knowing that these theories existed is kind of interesting, right? Because you probably saw a lot of phenomena that you didn't know how to name.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And so yeah, that part's been really fun to put a structure to my thinking and how I observe the world. It has made that process so much easier, I would say, to take in a situation and just have a system to organize it, analyze it, think about what are the other factors that are influencing.
Now I'm going to circle back to why you got into this idea of making a difference and helping businesses, transform into something that does public good. So I want you to talk for a second about your project in Costa Rica, and then how maybe have you found that this program has influenced that project and what you're working on there?
So happy to talk about the project. So the project started back in 2018, beginning of 2018, when I was living abroad, and started real estate development in Costa Rica, taking 170 acres of cleared pasture land, turning it into a master plan residential community that is under permaculture kind of processes and mentalities. So integrated food forests. All the roadways are planted with fruit trees. We've got farm on site, and some bees and all sorts of other some stuff to try and make a kind of a holistic ecosystem. And we've attracted customers or residents from 37 different countries around the world, about 20% of them local Costa Ricans. And so we wanted to make it have a core of Costa Ricans at the same point, be an eclectic group of people from around the world that are all intentionally choosing where they live and the type of life that they want to lead. And so that development is now going 7 years. All of the infrastructure is done, approved. And we've got about 30 or so homes built, another 30 or 40 under construction. And yeah, the community has really taken shape and taken over, and they're running it on a day-to-day basis. We're just wrapping up the last few things, negotiations with the municipality and the last communal building for them. And then we'll be able to fully step away. But the project was really designed around how can we be an example and be a positive influence in that community, from an environmental standpoint, from a local employment standpoint. And so we've done a lot of things that we're not technically required, to make sure that the local community sees us as an asset and sees us as a friend, as opposed to a bunch of bunch of rich people up the hill that are disconnected or just provide some, you know, low labor or low value jobs. And so we've really been intentional about making sure the local community feels part of the family. And so all of the workers are invited to dinners and sit and are served right alongside residents and everything else. So we've tried to model that mentality of how can we have a holistic business that does provide a return to investors, but invests heavily in that in the community in which it operates. And then had the question of how has this program influenced it? It's an interesting question. I would say honestly, not as much in the sense of it was pretty well underway before we were going. I would say that if anything, it has helped me think about the relations between some of the partners, the founding partners, and us in the community. And similarly, given me language, like we were talking about, a kind of a structure to the phenomena that I'm seeing. And so, you know, one of the theories we learned about is signaling theory. And it's like, when people are doing things, I'm like, oh, I can see this playing out. I can see the signals that they're trying to send and have a better means of deciphering that and understanding the motives behind it. So I would say that's the biggest way that it has helped, is giving structure to the phenomena.
Well, and that's great. And also, I think the fact that you're looking at it now, and probably always, but maybe more so now with that critical thinking lens of what really is happening here. And I wonder if it will become a basis of a research study at some point, so that it could potentially, the best learnings from it, be replicated.
Yeah, no, it certainly could. And I mean, even now, I think because it was so far underway initially, but now starting to look and reflect as it's starting to come to a close and thinking about, you know, what are the best ways to create impact? And so initially it's like, how can you create jobs? How can you do that? But then now in the work I've been doing in the local ecosystem, we're starting to look at what are the institutional constraints that create barriers for certain groups of people. And so it's like, it's an academic lens to look at the challenges, look at the inequalities that exist in a different way, and then try to come up with more impactful structural ways to influence them. And so in all reality, I'm actually quite pleased with how well I think we've done in terms of creating the impact. That reflecting doesn't say like, oh man, we really messed that up. On the other hand, it again, to your point, gives some structure to how could you replicate this? What is it about this that works? So that it's not a one-off, that you can understand the context and how that plays in, but then position it in what could be replicated somewhere else.
Right. Excellent. That's that's really, really great. You've actually applied this in a really great way. And I hope you can replicate it, because as I've watched you sort of go through that, I thought, this is the kind of thinking we want. And your investors made money. This is, it's really a successful project. And so it would be great to understand what are the elements and how could it be generalizable? Like it doesn't have to be a real estate development in Costa Rica, but it's the same principles. So that's
Yeah,
wild.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the fun part of getting to try and have those conversations with students. I teach right now, I'm teaching social entrepreneurship. And so it's like, okay, and I use that as an example along with lots of other things. And it's like, what are the ways that this actually creates value for everyone? Because nonprofits are really important, but they're not what scales and creates impacts all over the world generally. And so how can we use business to do that, like you say, in a generalizable way?
Yeah, great. All right. So final question, what professional advice do you have for PhD students or doctoral students of any kind?
Well, I would say for one, know your why. Like, why are you doing this? I think that has really helped me stay focused, stay committed, because it's hard. It's a long journey. And really focus on like you're building foundational skills. And so a good dissertation is a done dissertation, of course. Meanwhile, like you're learning how to do research and how to understand literature and how to speak an academic language that is foreign. And so instead of trying to get through and trying to finish up this paper, like dive into how that process works, because whether you go into academia or you go back to practice, those skills are really valuable and really beneficial in either space. But like most of school, you can try to get through it and just pass the test, or you can really dive into and appreciate and absorb that foundational knowledge. And I would say, trust the process, recognize the value of research as a tool, and how, and you'll see ways to apply that all over the place.
Wow, well said. I love the trust the process, especially.
It's a brutal
So,
process.
so thank you so much. I really appreciate this interview, and I'm sure the students will get a lot out of what you've had to say. So thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Kelly. It's always a pleasure to catch up.